When I lost my job, my husband sneered, calling me useless and saying he always knew I'd fail. He never knew I'd sold a patent for $97 million. When he pushed for divorce to upgrade, I agreed. Months later, that smirk vanished in an instant. Hi, I'm the woman my husband spent years tearing down the day I lost my job. He laughed in my face, called me useless, said he'd always known I'd fail. He thought I had nothing left, but I never told him about the patent I'd sold for $97 million, so when he pushed for a divorce to upgrade, I smiled, signed and stayed quiet. Months later, when he finally learned the truth, that smirk vanished in an instant. Before we dive in, what time is it? Where you are right now, and where are you listening from? Drop it in the comments. And guess how this ends? The wind carried that crisp, late autumn bite that makes you reach for a sweater without thinking. From the kitchen window, I watched the last streaks of daylight fade behind the bare trees. The house was warm enough, but there was a draft I couldn't place, maybe from the cracked seal on the back door, or maybe from the way my husband had been looking at me since I got home. It had been a Tuesday, ordinary in every way, until 3:17 p.m. when my manager asked me to step into his office for a quick chat. I knew before I sat down that it wasn't a chat. I'd been with the company for 9 years, senior, wrote patents under my belt, leading a team that brought in millions, and yet that day, all I heard was downsizing and realignment. My position was no longer sustainable. I drove home in silence, thinking maybe my husband David would at least pretend to care. By 6, the living room smelled faintly of rosemary and roasted chicken, not because he'd cooked. He'd ordered catering. Some of the guys are coming over. He'd said, when I walked in, figured we could all catch up by catch up. He meant he could hold court and remind everyone how well he was doing. He was pouring bourbon for himself and his two friends, Tom and Greg. When I came in from hanging up my coat, "Hey, honey," David said, smiling without warmth, "everyone, this is my unemployed wife." He laughed, taking a slow sip like it was the punchline of a good joke. Greg chuckled awkwardly. Tom avoided my eyes. I managed a polite smile. "Good evening." "Yeah," David went on. "She finally proved me right. Always said the corporate world was too cutthroat for her. Guess I was right." He leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying himself. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, had been perched at the far end of the table nursing a glass of Chardonnay. She'd been in town for a week, helping out, though her version of helping usually meant pointing out everything I wasn't doing right. "Well," Eleanor said, swirling her wine, "some women just aren't cut out for real responsibility. That's not a bad thing. It just means you're better suited for other roles." I didn't ask what other roles meant. I didn't have to. David smirked. His friends now more comfortable joining in. "Don't worry, babe," he said, "I'll handle the big stuff from now on. You can, I don't know, join a book club or something?" I kept my gaze steady, though inside every word landed like a small, sharp pebble while David launched into a story about a deal he was closing. I slid my hand into my lap, tilted my phone slightly, and opened my banking app. The number on the screen was steady, unblinking. $97,438,721. That patent sale from months ago had cleared without anyone in this house knowing, not David, not Eleanor, no one. I looked back up. He was still talking, waving his glass for emphasis. His friends nodded in rhythm with his voice, like they were under some spell. I didn't interrupt. I didn't defend myself. I just took in the scene, the polished wood table, the clink of ice and glasses, the faint scent of the food I hadn't been asked to serve. I felt the familiar weight of his arrogance, only this time it didn't crush me. It centered me. Eleanor rose, excusing herself to check on dessert, brushing past me with that faint, perfumed air of superiority. David was leaning into Greg now, explaining how freeing it was for me to be out of the rat race. I reached for my water glass, sipped slowly and let my mind wander not to the loss of a job, but to the quiet, steady power of a plan forming. By the time plates were cleared and coats were being shrugged on, I'd already decided I would not speak of the account, not hint at the deals I'd been quietly working on. I'd let him bask in this little performance of his law. Him believe the story he'd spun tonight. When the last guest left, David patted my shoulder like he was comforting a child. "We'll get through this, babe," he said, his voice dripping with a kind of false benevolence only a man who thinks he's one can manage. I smiled up at him. "I'm sure we will." And in that moment, I knew exactly when I'd let him lose everything. And 2 weeks later, I sat at the kitchen table, the soft hum of the coffee maker filling the silence. Morning light spilled in through the blinds, painting thin golden lines across the counter. I'd been up since dawn, but not because I couldn't sleep, more because I wanted every detail of this day etched in my memory. I heard the front door open and close. His footsteps carried that same confident weight I'd known for years, the sound of a man who believed the room belonged to him before he even stepped inside. A moment later, he walked in, followed by his lawyer, both in crisp suits, as though they'd been preparing for some kind of victory lap. "Morning," he said, dropping into the chair across from me without waiting for an invitation. His lawyer set down a leather briefcase, pulled out a neat stack of papers, and slid them toward me with a faint, calculated smile. "We've discussed what's fair." My husband began, voice low and deliberate. "Given how different our paths are, this is really a mercy. You should find someone who actually needs a partner." The lawyer jumped in smoothly. This settlement offers you clarity, no long, drawn-out process, no unnecessary drama. You'll have your clothes, personal belongings, and a modest stipend to help you start fresh, clean break for both of you. I let my eyes drop to the pages, minimal alimony, no share of marital assets, no mention of the years I'd supported him through his failed ventures, or the times I'd stayed up nights sorting through bills while he slept like the world owed him rest. I didn't argue, I didn't even sigh. I simply reached for the pen. Their eyes flicked toward each other, a brief flicker of smug satisfaction passing between them. They thought my silence was surrender. My signature an act of desperation. While I signed, I thought about my father's voice, the one I hadn't heard in over a decade. He used to say, if someone's digging a hole, don't take the shovel away, just make sure they have enough rope to finish the job. I slid the signed pages back across the table. The lawyer gathered them up quickly, like he just captured the winning hand in a card game. My husband leaned back, that self-satisfied smirk spreading across his face. You're doing the right thing, he said, for both of us.